Evidence for evolution quiz. Number 1, William discovered that 2 modern-day animals have very similar DNA, meaning the same. He concludes, or he decides, that the 2 animals are closely related. What type of evidence did William most likely use to reach his conclusion? Fossil evidence, genetic evidence, structural evidence. Which of these, number 2, which of these cases provides embryological evidence that 2 species share a common or the same ancestor? So there's 2 cases down here. Which of these cases provides embryological evidence that 2 species share the same ancestor? Is it 2 species with very similar or the same DNA? 2 species with different body structures? 2 different species with similar developing organisms? Number 3, which of these answers best describes a fossil? Thick layers of rock, an organism from which other organisms are descended, which means they come from. Remember, which of these best describes a fossil? The remains, or what's left over, or evidence of a once living organism found in layers of rock, ice, or amber. Number 4, the more closely related 2 different organisms are, the less similar their DNA is. More recently, they shared a common ancestor, or less likely, they are to have similar looking embryos. They are more closely related, these 2 organisms. Are they less similar in their DNA is, or more recently they shared a common ancestor, or less likely they are to have similar looking embryos? Snakes have small leg bones that are not used for movement. What is the most likely explanation for this? Snakes do not have ancestors. Snakes are an example of a transitional fossil. Snakes descended or came from organisms that have legs. So what is the most likely explanation for snakes having small legs that are not used? Number 6, the diagram below shows a portion or a part of the fossil record in sedimentary rock. So you can see there's different layers here, A, B, C, and D. So you have to look at A, look across, B, look across, C, look across here, and D, look down here. Different rock layers in fossils are clearly visible. Which of these statements is true of the fossils and rock layers shown in the diagram? Layer A contains the most recently or the newest formed fossils. The fossils in layer B are older than those in layer D. The fossils in layer D are the most recently or the newest formed. Number 7, which of the following provides structural evidence for evolution? Structural evidence. The embryos of 2 animals look similar at similar stages. A genetic analysis, or they look at the genes of 2 animals, shows similar sequences or order of the DNA. Sequence means the order of the DNA. Similar bones in the legs of a human, a dog, and a bat. So again, that's structural evidence. Number 8, the bones of a human arm are homologous to structures in all of the following except so the bones of a human arm are the same, homo means same, to structures in all of the following except a whale flipper, butterfly wing, a bird wing, which is the same as the bones of a human arm. Number 9, which of these descriptions is an example of a vestigial body structure? Vestigial. A bat's wing that enables or allows it to fly, the tiny leg bones in snakes that have no legs, the tentacles of an octopus that help it in movement and catching prey. Number 10, Tara is comparing, or how are they the same or different, the embryos of parrotfish and salamanders. So looking at parrotfish and salamanders, how are they same? How are they different? Although the adult organisms look very different, the embryos look very similar. What does this suggest? The parrotfish and the salamanders likely share in the same fossil layer in a fossil bed. That parrotfish and salamanders likely share a common ancestor. So when you compare a parrotfish and a salamander, it says the adult organisms look very different. So think about how a parrotfish and a salamander look, but the embryos look very similar. So what does this suggest to you? The parrotfish and the salamanders likely share in the same fossil layer in a fossil bed, or that parrotfish and salamanders likely share a common ancestor. 11, whales evolved or changed from four-legged mammals that lived on land. Is this true or false? Whales evolved from four-legged mammals that lived on land. Number 12, human tailbones and wisdom teeth are examples of homologous structures. True or false? Which means are they the same or something else? Number 13, Tiktaalik is an example of the transitional fossil between amphibians and reptiles. So transitional means that there's change happening between the amphibians and the reptiles. Is this true or false? And then 14, a transitional fossil is a fossil that shows how an animal died, a fossil that shows how animals that lived in different areas are the same, a fossil that shows a link from one type of animal to another. A transitional fossil is a fossil that shows how an animal died, a fossil that shows how animals that lived in different areas are the same, a fossil that shows a link from one type of animal to another.